Hi, Year 4. Today we are looking at decimals again today. Yesterday we learned that a decimal was split into two parts. It's got the whole, the decimal point, and the fractional part. And we also learned that a decimal sits between two whole numbers. Okay, so it'd be in the middle of two whole numbers either side. That's probably the most important part to remember today, because today we're going to be looking at rounding decimals to the nearest whole. So it's really important that you know exactly what a decimal is and where it would sit on a number line, so that we can round it to the nearest whole properly. So we know when we are rounding just general whole numbers that if the number ends in 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4, that we round it down. And if the number ends in 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9, we round it up. And we know that we can apply this whether we're rounding to the nearest 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000. It's still the same rule. We can use this as well when we are rounding decimals to the nearest whole. What we have to do is actually look at the fractional part after the decimal point. So for example, here I've got 32.8. We don't look at the whole, we look at the point, the bit after the point, the fractional part. I've circled the 8 here because this is the fractional part of this decimal. I know that 8 is higher than 5, so I'm going to round it to the next whole, which is 33. I'm just going to give you some examples here and show you how to find the holes on either side if you're a little bit confused. So I've just popped here a bit of a reminder to show you which way it rounds. So remembering that if the fraction ends in, or sorry, the decimal ends in 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4, we round down. And if it ends in 5 to 9, we round up. So the decimal we're going to look at today is 13.3. Now I know that a decimal sits between two whole numbers on a number line. So the two whole numbers on either side of this decimal would be 13 and 14. My next step is to look at this number here. Okay, the fractional part of the decimal. I know that it sits in this range here between 0 to 4, so it must round down. So 13.3 rounds to 13, meaning that it is closest to 13. We're going to try another example over here. The decimal we're going to look at now is 118.7. I know that if I had this on a number line, this number would sit between two holes. The holes it would sit between would be 118 and 119. Now looking at my little picture over here, I know that 7 is in the range between 5 and 9. So it must round up to 119. So the decimal, 118.7 is closest to 119. Now this gets a little bit tricky when we look at decimals that have two decimal places after the point. So if we're looking at a decimal, say 3.45, it's still sitting between two holes. We know that this part here means 45 out of 100. Okay, so the two holes on the either side of this decimal is going to be 3 and 4. Now, here's where it gets a bit tricky. You need to look at this bit here. Okay, we still don't really need to pay any attention to the number in the hundredths column. We're just looking at the number in the tenths column still. It's still going to determine which way we round. Okay, so even though there is a couple numbers there, it could have even more afterwards. You still just need to look at that number in the tenths column. So I know that 4 after the decimal point would round down. So 3.45 would round down to 3.